Good morning, Smite fans, and welcome back to another day of Smite Esports action. Kicking it off first with the SCC, or Smite Challenger Circuit, here in the North American side this time around. Average Joe's, Herculean Hoofs going at it again today for the first time this phase at least. My name is J-Max Tucker. Joining me, the best taco onto this one to break down this game, and this ought to be a really interesting one. I mean, I know we talked about the fun of yesterday's with Elysium and Pandemonium, but we're back in NA, which means we're going to see a lot of fighting this time around.
Especially when it comes to the Herculean Hoofs. They are certainly a roster that loves getting in that up and aggressive play style, so would certainly expect some sparks to fly relatively early on here. And Average Joe, certainly not a team that's scared by any means to get it a little bit dirty with the engagements.
Yeah, I mean, you got Promise and Griff over there in that dual lane. Those two love to fight. And then you got Elion into the jungle on the side of the Average Joes. And taking a look at the schedule, you can't see that's our matchup today. We'll be back with the Snake Hunters and Just F6 for EU tomorrow. And then Sunday, one more time, back in NA for Sturdy Artisans versus Tiburones de Tijuana. But Average Joes, their solo laner Uzi, I think, is kind of the big talking point for me. He's been kind of a pivotal point for this team. I feel like he's been one of the harder carries out of that solo lane, kind of redefining the NA meta in the SCC, kind of brought Cthulhu back into it, was big on the Kakolan proponent whenever he was first coming back up into the Rise.
Yeah, Uzi's, I think, just a player that has a lot of versatility behind him. He's someone that is just going to try and take the best option possible, I think, for making the team fight as easy as possible. And Uzi also has a pretty steep tendency to want to just play around his jungler, has a lot of synergy there, so it makes sense why he just looks for those chaotic and controlling type of solo laners.
And Elion does like to stick with a lot of the classic assassins into the jungle, not as much into the warrior play, although this is the first time we're seeing the NA boys over here on the newest mid-season patches, so we'll see how maybe that adaptation comes through here for Elion and Masked over into the jungle on the side of the Hooves. But for the Joes, they've been playing a lot, like you said, off of their jungler, kind of with that solo lane synergy onto it, get Uzi ahead, so that way when that team fight stage comes through, he can just be that big beast that no one can take down.
I think it's also going to be instrumental for Average Joes to keep an eye on what happens inside of this mid lane, J-Mac, because when it comes to the Herculean Hooves, you have to expect that they are going to constantly be looking for ways to kind of channel their aggression through that mid-jungle gameplay. And as you know, support also has a tendency, I think, to get involved with that mix, and with Promise in that support role as well for the Average Joes. I think that this is going to be a great challenge for them to see just how well they really mesh up with this team.
Well, they're going to be taking on the Herculean Hooves, like we talked about, with the Joes. Going over onto the Hooves, you got Meerkat and Mask going to be in that solo and jungle, respectively. Meerkat, fairly well known amongst the SCC scene, even had some time in the Pro League for a while. It's also got Baskin there in the mid lane. Baskin, the almighty, the unstoppable, probably one of the best players to touch the game here in the SCC side especially, and he has a monster of a god pool, has been playing so many different gods, not just in his mid lane role, but throughout his career in general.
Something that's kind of exclusive for the Herculean Hooves is that this entire roster at one point in time has been in the Smite Pro League. It's just, when it comes down to it, I don't feel as though they're completely impossible to stop by any means, but they are certainly forces to be reckoned with. Definitely all very valid players in their own rights, respectively. And not only that, Mac, but I also think that when it comes to trying to determine between who's going to be the carry on this team, I think it could be just about any single one of them.
Yeah, there is no one specific carry for it, like you're saying. Everybody kind of dips their toes into that pool for it. I mean, Snoopy from time to time on here as well has been really loving this Danzaburo ever since he became big into the meta. Meerkat has just been sticking a lot with the King Arthur. I've been noticing in a lot of his former matches, even with this new phase, I'll be interested to see if he sticks with the King Arthur, because it's not like he got any worse with the mid-season. If anything, he stayed at least the same, and maybe some of the other warriors just kind of got better around him.
I think the main thing is that it really just depends as far as the overall team compositions, as well as what you're playing into, whether or not you want to find yourself with those physical warriors or some of those Guardian matchups that we've been seeing more often.
Yeah, and I think that's going to maybe affect the picks and bans here with those new Guardians coming in. As we go into picks and bans for game number 1, we'll see where they throw their prioritization in the ban column. I would think maybe some shots over at Elion on the side of the Hoofs to ban that one away, or even just the Athena, as we saw in one of the highlights. Uzi does like to play this one over in the solo lane.
Taking away Global is always a strong look, but I would imagine for the Joes, it's probably going to be a heavy mage-focused Tiamat already being stripped away. Would expect maybe Morgan Le Fay to join soon after. Soul, also another, I think, valid mage to start looking towards banning. She just provides so much pressure inside that mid lane, and it is going to be the Tiamat and the Morgan Le Fay so far. Meanwhile, the Hoofs, they are just completely trying to run it down in the support frontline category.
Yeah, they are making sure to keep Promise down as much as they can. 3 Guardian bans right off the bat, where on the flip side we do see 2 mages in the Tiamat and Morgan Le Fay, our newest 2 to the mid lane. And then the Artemis, who's been on the up and rise in the Hunter role. That does leave Gilgamesh open, and I'm kind of just thinking back to what you were saying about the Soul. It feels like ever since Morgan Le Fay dropped and she's been now competitively playable, teams just kind of forgot about the Soul. They're not prioritizing it to the same degree that they used to.
Well, it's also because of the recent meta swaps have, I think, brought some other mages into light. Raijin, Baba Yaga, you still have a lot of burst potential with these characters. And I think the main thing when it comes to Soul is that she just has a little bit more difficulty at times, I think, kind of channeling some of that aggression. She can always have strong lane clear, but when you know that you're dealing with the likes of a Gilgamesh, might be better to prioritize the survivability. I think that Baba Yaga's blast off certainly accomplishes that, and I like this Odin pickup as well for the average Joes. I think that right now both of these teams definitely have some pieces of their drafts that are relatively flexible in terms of where the gods might actually end up.
Yeah, I think that's the fun thing about some of these NA players here in the SCC is we see this Odin. Now, traditionally in SPL, we're like, okay, this is Odin solo, no question. I don't think anybody's playing jungle. There's 3 roles this Odin can go into with almost any one of these NA teams. You could see it into the solo, you could see it in the jungle, you could see it in support even. There are still a few players, I think Blugan most notably really does love playing those warrior supports onto it, so we'll have to see where this goes. It definitely won't be into the support role though, with that Ganesh locked in onto the flip side for the Joes. And into the bans they go. Heimdall going to be the first Hunter taken off along with the Erlang Shen.
And Ganesh is an interesting pickup here as well for the average Joes, because right now, J-Mag, I'd say it's a little bit awkward in terms of their actual follow-up potential surrounding inside of that Odin cage, but I do like the lockdown potential that an Odin cage and those Dharmic pillars are going to be able to provide. It's like a restrictive space, so if the average Joes are able to draft strong follow-up components with this current restrictive measures, that could make things really difficult, I think, for the Raijin and Gilgamesh to really prosper here. Windsor Shamash, of course, another great ability for kind of controlling a lot of space in a team fight, but can be shut down, I think, with the likes of an Odin cage and the Dharmic pillars.
Double cage. That's all I'm seeing on this side. You got Odin and the Ganesh, both of their ultimates drop down. If anybody doesn't have any kind of mobility at that point, they catch the Raijin on a Thunder Crash, they catch the Gilgamesh's Leap, or even catch Fafnir sleeping in the middle of it. That's going to be a pain to get out of on top of that. Then you throw in the pillar with on her, and now it just feels like you have no option at all. If your mobility is down, you might as well kiss your life goodbye. So they're going to draft an Uller for a little bit of mobility in the Hunter role, but we haven't really seen a ton of success out of the Uller as of recent.
No, I think Uller, while he'll always be a great hunter in terms of his actual burst potential, it's just the survivability aspects can get a little bit more questionable when it comes to that competitive level of play. Probably one of the more punishable hunters in terms of him not having a CC immune ultimate or an ultimate in general, so if he's not able to get that early to mid-game channeled aggression for a little bit of snowball involved, it can make life pretty difficult, but it's exciting to see Griff rocking the honor one more time. I was really impressed with what he did last time we saw him on this pick up against the, I believe it was Mollusk in the gang. So it's I think strong here for Griff to have this on her because it's such a brawl-heavy factor, which I think is something that the average Joes are definitely going to need if they want to hold it down and duo up against the likes of a Fafnir Uller.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the play style that the Joes love, is they love these more brawl-centric gods, like the on her going up against, you said the Uller onto it. Ganesh, maybe not the most aggressive, get-in-your-face support in the early stages, use that dash, and it's pretty much kissing your life goodbye at that point for it. But with the Circuit rounded out onto it, you do see a little bit of a kind of a pick-oriented comp with this one. I'm looking at it for the Joes.
That's definitely more what I'm leaning towards as well with this average Joes composition, especially with the Circuit being involved. And if the average Joes are able to be precise, then they've definitely got a lot to work with here. But the question is whether or not they're going to be able to catch the Herculean Hooves off guard or even be able to just force those sort of engagements to basically compromise the Herculean Hooves, because if they're able to stagger some respawn timers here throughout Game 1, J-Mac, that could make things incredibly problematic for the Herculean Hooves to actually play around that Fafnir for the objectives.
Now it is game number 1 of the first NA SCC set of the phase. Herculean Hoofs and Average Joes slapping it out here. We do see the Baba Yaga, like we said, going into the mid lane on the rise as of recent with Season 8's mid-season patch. With the removal of that boots, we've been seeing this god really favored because now you don't got to worry about boots. You can go straight into the stacking, and what better god to stack than the god who gets free stacks?
Yeah, no real surprises. Seeing Bedroni and as well as Baskin both opting for those Vampiric Shrouds, but again, Bedron makes perfect sense for him to want to start leaning towards that Warlock staff early on with the Baba Yaga, thanks to that passive like you just mentioned. And I'm also trying to keep an eye here, though, on Meerkat with this Gilgamesh solo. With the Osiris last pick having been locked in there for the Herculean Hooves, wasn't completely sold which way that would go, but Odin in the laning phase up against a Gilgamesh, think that Odin wins out on that one typically.
Let's see if maybe the SCC squads here can break the Osiris curse of yesterday. Yesterday we saw 3 Osiris jungle games, and every single one of them you end up losing. So we'll see if maybe Mass can make a difference here for his squad on the Herculean Hooves. Early action to the mid lane like you'd expect. Elion getting a little bit low. The sickle blocked by Bayraniri. Elion still getting low. Doesn't have his mobility. And finally will be able to walk in and get those last basics necessary to get first blood.
It was a strong attempt, but trying to look for the Death Feint aggression inside of a creep wave is just too much minion damage. Griff, on the other hand, going to eat a solid combination there between the Hammer Stun and Snoopy's follow-up off that Uller combination. And that's the main thing to keep an eye out for, is all of this early to mid-game pressure, J-Mac, that the Herculean Hooves have opted for. And for them to find an early pick in that mid lane, it could potentially start to trickle over elsewhere.
Look, in all my years of playing mid, I have learned you do not walk up to a Raijin at level 2 because he's going to have Raiju available for him. He's probably not going that dash. You get it by Raiju, that's pretty much just game over for you. And unfortunately for Elion, he experienced the brunt end of that one. And back into the dual lane, Snoopy has made his return back into the lane. He used up quite a lot of his mana going for the poke on a Griff. He's going to jump in. Nice impale by Griff. Will push Snoopy away, leaps away as well just to get to an extra spot of safety.
Snoopy is just playing this so well next to Gino, but it's going to be an early gank in the solo lane. El Leon alongside Uzi going to take out Meerkat. Meerkat getting a little over-aggressive. Seems to have forgotten for a second there since El Leon died early on, but a nice recovery for this Serket. Now going to find himself still trailing a little bit in terms of experience up against Mask on that Osiris, but a kill bounty is sure to at least bring him back into contention for this early game period.
Such is the bane of Meerkat. He seems to be, I believe, the most first blood. Now, somebody could probably, like, maybe Gormizer could actually pull the stats, but it feels to me like Meerkat is often the most first-blooded member of his team. That even went back into some of his collegiate days as well. But an aggression at the purple buff is going to get the beads out of Promise. Mask and Gino still going aggressive. Leap in, not enough damage, and Promise will be able to make it to the safety of the tower.
Unfortunately, though, the purple buff will not safely go the way of Average Joe's. A successful invade at the very least for the Herculean Hooves. So now with that purple buff timer in tow, I'd have to expect that the Herculean Hooves are going to continue to revisit every single time that buff respawns. And this is how it starts, I think, with a lot of these early to mid-game based aggressive style comps. You want to take over the buff pressure and then just transition that into the objective play. And when it comes to the Herculean Hooves, all the experience that's on this roster, J-Mac, it's really not that surprising to see Mash just looking to play off of the dual lane, not trying to really allow Griff to hit that early to mid-game stride either on the Honor, where I think Honor could really fare pretty well in the Uller 1v1.
Well, Meerkat on his level 5 quest picks up the Enchanted Buckler for himself. Just proccing over into 5, still waiting to get to that 6. Promise again being under fire by Mass, and a rotation from Gino on the back end of it. A knock up onto Mass is good. The house comes down looking for the shots, but not going to have a great target to throw him onto. Gino still waiting in the wings in the back. Gets a stun on El Leon, but that's just a guarantee that he can get out. Some nice damage from the fire on the ultimate. El Leon's going to get the ult onto Gino, throws him right into the mix of it. Ohm comes through to prevent any kind of leaps away, and Bayraniri will be able to pick up his first kill of the match. And with the rotation over from Snoopy now out of the Herculean Hooves, it's still 3v1 in this mid lane.
Snoopy just going to find a little bit of poke up against Leon, but Snoopy, it was the hesitation aspect. He was probably told to get called off. He considered making the rotation to mid a little bit sooner, was hovering in those left mid camps, but thought that the Herculean Hoofs were under no real pressure there. Just a nice dive at Elion to pull Gino outside of his own T1 tower safety net, and Average Joes find themselves with a kill lead advantage, and everything stabilized as far as the gold is concerned. Well, a couple of experience leads here and there for both teams, but no real advantages just yet, either side.
Yeah, for an NA game, this is actually pretty tame so far. I mean, quite a bit of fighting started up. We did see the purple buff invade. A little bit low on the kill counter as far. They're not able to quite secure those, but maybe going for another attempt here. Ohm comes out onto Gino, but they're not getting anything off of that one. However, in the solo lane, action kicks off. Mask picks up Elion after a nice drop kick on the wall by Meerkat. And Gino still looking for aggression to mid lane, but not going to be able to find anything.
Unfortunately, it's the risk first reward of having that blink first relic, and Elion getting caught out by that Gilgamesh dropkick. CC just a little bit better than having that aggressive initiation period, but I like this from the Herculean Hoofs. They're forcing a responsive rotation out of the Average Joes, and even if this buff invade isn't successful, it's still a small win for Gino, forcing the Average Joes to 3-man split a single buff camp.
Baronary, who just picked up that Warlock staff, already at 24 stacks. That's the power that this Baba Yaga can bring you, and it's why we've been seeing her so often. Maybe not an every game kind of god, but for sure more often than we saw her at any point post-release back in the previous season and previous splits onto it. So we'll see how he continues his build path beyond here, but Baskin has been unrelenting in this mid lane, making sure to keep up that pressure on the Raijin.
But Baskin has to be careful. Nice caught opportunity here for Elion as the damage starts raining in. Home Sweet Home going to be broken out by Bedron. It's Dharmic Pillars that actually gets the credit for the last kill. Bedron going to take that one home for himself. A Mass looking for the cleanup on the backside and does find Bedron in the process.
Gino gets a nice stun onto Elion, locking him down, and Mass able to pick it up with the help of the minions. Wins a Shamash from Meerkat out of the solo lane, comes through, and Promised will fall down. Triple kill for Mass on the Osiris.
That just went from good to bad to worse for Average Joes. Everything that could have possibly gone wrong there. It's largely just Mass getting the triple kill bounty that's going to make this the worst part about it. Freebies from Snoopy as Griff going to come under fire here, but the dive not feeling too confident on it just yet. That is until Gino gets involved in the mix. Griff going to invest the Desert Fury, but with Gino taking up those tower shots, no problem. Snoopy going to manage to walk away without any sort of issues, and the lead just continues to extend now for the Herculean Hoofs. While the gold is still not that far ahead, it's largely just the experience department that's taken the biggest blow there for the Average Joes.
Yeah, you're seeing about a level across the board as far as the jungle and the dual lane goes. Mid even has about a half level up here with Baskin. Meerkat the only one kind of struggling, though he did fall earlier on to the gank from Elion in that lane, so a little bit expected for him to kind of be on the worse for wear there. He's never really expected to be the hard carry for his team. They just want him to farm up. We get to late game. Now you're this super tanky warrior or guardian or whichever role you opt to go into for it, and now you can join the fights and really make some big impacts for it. So Snoopy, though, is going to go in aggressive on the Promise. He has to drop the Dharmic Pillars, and another pillar comes down from Griff, locking Snoopy in place. Nowhere to go for the Hunter. He gets taken down quickly for the Joes.
It seems as though Average Joe's just right time, right place. And Herculean Hoofs, I understand they want to be aggressive, and now that Mask has joined, Lord of the Afterlife going to be expended straight onto Veyron. Blastoff's going to buy him a little bit of time, but it's Promise who's under fire now, and I don't think that Gino and Mask are going to let him go.
Now Mask is just going to walk straight at him, and maybe onto Baroniri as well. Drop kick against the winds, and Meerkat on another big rotation from Solo picks up his first kill of the game. Green buff stolen away. Backcamp's still down from the previous engagement.
And everything kind of just disperses after the fact, but it's largely just the understanding that the Herculean Hoofs have, even after they lose a member, still continuing to be aggressive, understanding that they can continue to just play through Mass after he received that triple kill bounty. And the other thing, too, is that this Osiris, early to mid-game, is by far his best period of activation. And even though I like the Dharmic Pillars and I really like the Odin Cage, I am a little concerned now at how well those components are actually going to be able to be used together here for the Average Joes. The Herculean Hoofs can continue forcing picks like this.
Yeah, about 1,500 golden experience, as we saw in the graph, separating the two teams, both in favor of the Hoofs. They're going to go ahead and grab the fort. Scorpion on the left side has already been taken. Blue buff Looks like it was unsuccessful in being stolen there by Gino, so that will go the way of Uzi. Make sure that he can guarantee his buff, and keeping Gino pushed back down to about half health onto this Fafnir. I like the aggression that Gino is putting across the map, trying to keep his team in this.
But this is tough for El Leon. He's now sitting 2 levels behind this Osiris, maybe even closer to 2.5 at this point, as Draugr will be collected by Snoopy. Griff looking to continue the chase, really wants to try and be aggressive on this Uller, but Snoopy just understanding there's no one from his team currently on the duo side of the map to really back him up, unless the rotation seems to be a bit forced here from the Herculean Hoofs. They understand they just want to show face. They don't really want to actually have to commit. They'd rather prioritize the farm, but the average Joes, they're just trying to scramble, I think, and Herculean Hoofs, they've already got 3 members in play. Might as well pull the Gold Fury.
Gold Fury of Dharmic Pillars dropped, and the Gold Fury will be leashed immediately afterward. Gino going to walk forward and try and zone out Baronir and Promise. And going to get a nice little stun onto the mid laner. Baskin walks forward as well, and Uzi has made a full rotation to this side of the map with that teleport. Gino's going to have to leap over the wall and go for the D-transform. Everybody on the map now on this left-hand side. Blink cage in by Uzi right onto Mass. He's going to get a Lord of the Afterlife for a nice little bit of damage, but he'll fall down shortly to Baroniri. In goes Meerkat into the back. Does not have those Winds of Samash available for the fight, but Uzi getting low. Going to be a nice drop kick from Meerkat. Stuns Uzi and Promise. They're chasing down the solo laner. They want him down, but eventually they will be able to take down Promise. Leap in from Meerkat, but the shield comes out from Uzi, and he's going to make it.
Uzi barely managing to survive, but trading out the support. And so it's been a support for jungle exchange. Definitely one that favors the average Joes. However, Herculean Hooves, a little bit more HP to their names. And Snoopy going to try and help his team pull that Gold Fury. Baskin, though, you typically don't want Raijin playing zone duty up against 2. Granted, average Joes just sort of understanding they can't overstep their boundaries just yet, and a nice heads-up play from Baskin to just collect the Oracles. Knows that there's not enough burst just yet, no one's healthy enough to actually take out the Gold Fury, but having the freebie vision at the very least will make it possible for the Herculean Hooves to continue just looking for those little skirmishes surrounding that Gold Fury.
And that was a huge kill for the average Joes as well. In a normal sense, the jungler for support is always going to be a worthwhile for whoever lost the support. But in this case, it was a 6-0 Osiris for Mask going up. And now Elion has been able to somewhat catch up with that. Not quite fully caught up, but closer to that level and a half now compared to the nearly 3 levels that he was beforehand. Griff getting aggressive here against Snoopy and Gino, and that's because Promise is on the way to try and make a rotation to help out his Hunter, but nothing more to come from there. Promise ticks over into level 9 on his rotation, and everybody will just go back to a little bit more passive farming for the time being.
Griff losing those purification beads, though, means that he's going to have to play a little bit more passive in this Uller matchup. And on the other hand, though, Meerkat rotating into the mid lane yet again from solo means that Vedrone, he's going to have to back off into the safety of his T1 tower, but it seems as though the Herculean Hooves, they want to revisit that Gold Fury pit and see if they can pull this objective for themselves.
Transformation out of Gino. Gold Fury started up by Masked and Snoopy. Gonna throw the course onto 2. Uzi gets stunned out, and the shield evaporated immediately. Leap in by Gino, finds Griff. Meerkat goes for a zoning jump with his heroic leap. Winds of Shamash drop down inside the Dharmic Pillars, and Meerkat is able to pick up Promise on the end of it. Mask will fall as well to Baroniri. Baskin trying to find a way out here, but he doesn't have the damage to survive against Uzi and Veron. And Snoopy will make sure to get the cleanup kill onto El Leon. It's a 2-for-2 trade, and still looking for more. Uzi low, stun comes through, but a beads out of Snoopy and a drop kick out of Meerkat.
It's just going to take so much time before Griff's able to rejoin the fray. He was shoved out early on in that entire engagement. Veron could potentially survive here. No blast off, and Griff, now having finally made his way into the mid lane, has an opportunity, I think, to look towards Gino, but doesn't want to get too aggressive with it, just understanding most of the fight has pretty much already been dispersed. May as well just fall back to farming aspects, and unfortunately for the average Joes, they take the short end of the stick on that exchange, but for the most part, given how split that team fight was for both of these teams, I do think that the average Joes did a strong job holding their own, given the fact that they have the current experience deficit.
We see Leon going for a little bit different of a Circuit build than we've been seeing out of players like Lasbra or even Johnny in the SPL. We're seeing this Runeforged Hammer as a second item. Kind of how does that round out for this Circuit as far as, the play style that they're wanting to go?
He's just trying to enhance some of that crowd control damage because there is a lot of initiation and setup potential, I think, for the average Joes. It's just when you find yourselves trailing in the experience department, it becomes a little bit more difficult to try and be as proactive with those initiating measures. So with that in mind, still think that the Runeforged Hammer is definitely a solid pickup. Just gives basic stats, I feel like, that can still enhance a Circuit's gameplay. It's just whether or not the average Joes are going to be able to actually group that it makes the difference here.
Right, back to the Gold Fury they go. The Hoofs are able to secure it. The Dharmic Pillars are dropped as well as the cage from Uzi. It's just Meerkat stuck inside. The Ohm will hold him for a moment. He's going to get the quick beads to get out, but Uzi is still walking forward, leaps in on top of Meerkat, but the winds drop down. Home sweet home out of Bayraniri. Not going to do quite enough damage to take anyone down, and it looks like the majority of the Hoofs are going to make it out, or make that all 5 members. No one on the Joe is able to secure one of those kills.
Best case scenario right now for the average Joes is to see if they could try to force down this T1 tower in mid as a response and possibly even look towards the Pyromancer after that. But Snoopy, Baskin, Bolt still relatively healthy, and the average Joes took a decent chunk of health throughout that chase after the Gold Fury.
Well, Tier 1 tower does go down. Baskin and Snoopy not wanting to step too far forward against the double front line that was available for average Joes. 1 CC chain could have spelled their ultimate doom, though there was still beads on the side of Baskin. Although ult's still down for the time being, so a brunt of his damage off the table. And immediately they'll go right back over to the Pyromancer, and this is what the Hoofs like to do. Once they finally get that first objective through, they finally are able to break through onto everything. It's just objective after objective. Now it's that map control that the Hoofs really love to play around here, and with Baskin on this Raijin, level 15, has that advantage over Bayraniri. Despite being down 5 kills to him, he's still holding his own and holding that experience lead.
Gino has to be careful here, though. A nice dropkick from Meerkat. It's going to buy Gino a little bit of space there away from Uzi and El Leon. And I think the main thing to keep in mind is that channeled aggression in mid lane from the average Joes might have been a little bit of frustration kind of stemming through there, J-Mac, because I think the appropriate play would have probably been just to back and reset and fully look for another re-engagement around that Pyromancer, because by just forcing down that T1 in mid, it's not going to be really enough gold to make up the difference for the Gold Fury they just lost. And not only that, but everybody was still sitting at around half HP for the average Joe, so they didn't have any sort of opportunity to look to try and contest the Pyromancer after the fact, basically having to forfeit both of the primary global objectives available at that point in time. And for the Herculean Hoofs, that's just like a total win out, because the disengage, that's all they were after they took the Gold Fury.
Yeah, I mean, with that fight, they're down almost 2,500, close to 3,000 gold. They lost both of the objectives. That's now going to set up for the Oni Fury to be on the next spawn for the Furies. Pyromancer going down, not the end of the world. You lose out a little bit of gold. That haste effect is always nice, though, to get repositioned for those fights, especially if they're looking for any potential Fire Giant fights. But so far, the Herculean Hooves are just trying to get some extra farm going before their next fight. You don't really see any major groupings by the Hooves. However, with the Joes, you do see 3-4 members around that mid lane looking to see if they can grab anybody. Maybe they can try and get a shot at Snoopy here, but Elion's level 14 right now compared to level 17 on Snoopy.
But Leon has at least managed to cut the gap that he was originally behind on this Osiris jungle. A 3-level lead turned into none. All things considered, that's a pretty steep catch-up there from El Leon, and I think the average Joe's starting to understand they have a pick composition, may as well try to utilize it.
That turnaround Ohm just stopped the dropkick dead in its place out of Meerkat, but the home sweet home still expended out of Bayraniri trying to get something. Uzi into the midst of 3 of them, gets stunned out. Dharmic Pillars drop down. All ults but Griffs are off the table for the Joes, but meanwhile the Hoofs still have most of theirs. Meerkat gonna leap away and get out of into safety, and that'll be the disengage for the Hoofs.
Herculean Hoofs just biding their time right now, and it's going to be mass sent back to base. However, 4 members still standing here for the Herculean Hoofs, and they can definitely spot out the average Joes are considering this Fire Giant pit as pulling the objective, but Herculean Hoofs they're just going to wait and see whether or not the average Joes actually want to continue playing this game of chicken or not, and it's going to be the average Joes choosing to back off, understanding Herculean Hoofs, they're not going to take the bait of actually walking into that Fire Giant pit looking for a contest.
Well, Baskin walks forward, but immediately gets ohmed out. Baranuri will live to see another day because of that, and this is a lot of the power that Ganesh support has. These more channel-heavy gods like the Raijin, like the Baba Yaga as far as her leap goes onto it, Ganesh does such a great job of just shutting that down. You want to try and use Percussive Storm Raiju. Okay, you threw the Raiju, and right as you're thinking of using Percussive Storm, instant ohm. Now the ability's on cooldown. You didn't get any of your damage off, and I just get a laugh in your face.
Promise has definitely been doing a great job, I think, at utilizing the Om into preventing a lot of the initial setup that Meerkat has been looking for, as well as Gino. And again, it's just, this is really going to come down to the objective play at this point, J-Mac, because right now, as far as map pressure is concerned, definitely leaning a little bit more towards the Herculean Hoofs. In fact, only for your respawns, first thing the Herculean Hoofs do, group and try to take it.
Gino going to leap in but not find anybody with the stun. Dharmic Pillars drop out of Promise, and Gino has to de-transform right in the midst of it. Elion getting credit for the kill, leaping over the wall to find Mass, who's forced to use the Lord of the Afterlife. And now the Oni Fury that was once in the Hoofs control is starting to tip towards average Joes. Promise goes in with the knockup onto Baskin, and the Ulm as well, just for zone. Elion gets a nice Cobra's Kiss onto one, and an immediate disengage by the Joes as soon as they grab that Oni.
Maybe bit off a little bit more than they could chew there, the Herculean Hooves. I understand that they want to utilize the Draconic form on that Fafnir to try and shred these objectives, but they've got to be careful not to die to the objective in advance. And I think the primary issue that the Herculean Hooves have been having with these objective pulls is they're not looking to clear out first. Typically, you want to try and find a pick or two before you just pull these objectives outright. And I'm not going to say it's disrespectful by any means, because Herculean Hooves, they're just better than that. It's just that I think that maybe they're not giving as much consideration as they should into how strong the responsive measures actually are from this average Joe's draft.
I think it's also just a case of who's the secure on either of these teams. There is no, big burst ultimate to really take that in an instant. There's no 1K drop in an instant. It's a lot of periodic damage coming out of them between Baskin, Baraniri, Griff. Even Snoopy's got to use 2-3 abilities to get even remotely close to that same level of secure.
I think I would definitely favor the Baba Yaga in terms of confirmation over the Raijin, just because you do have a little bit more of that channeled burst damage. Whether it's from her ultimate or if it's from another part of her kit, she definitely just has a couple of tools that I think the damage comes out a little bit quicker than that of the Raijin. But Taiko Drums, of course, always something to take into consideration whenever you're looking for an objective pool, because Baskin, it doesn't really matter as much if average Joes get a Fire Giant, for example, if everybody is incredibly low and the Herculean Hooves can chase them down after the fact. So it's really just about both or either side, whoever decides to try and pull that Fire Giant first, being a little bit more proactive, I think, in terms of just looking for a pick advantage before actually trying to take the objective.
Speaking on the Taiko Drums, it's been a very quiet game for Baskin. He's usually up in the forefront. I mean, we saw the early attempt, level 2. That's where he kind of made it through. But I haven't really seen very many Taiko Drums, if any, especially in these big team fights. I feel like maybe he can make some more of an impact if he can get some big hits off. But I just haven't seen him really land any ultimates yet.
Largely due to the fact that Promise, Ozzy, they've been doing an excellent job at just keeping Baskin zoned away from the fights. Baskin, more often than not, has been having to actually dash away on this Raijin, or Herculean Hooves, because they're playing so aggressively around objectives. When they look for those objective pools, sometimes they get them, but at the same time, in order to disengage, Baskin has to utilize those Taiko Drums defensively. So it's just been a little bit more difficult with the way the average Joes have played for Baskin to look for that centerpiece of aggression.
Elion down to half and a Thunder Crash in. He's going to force the dash and the leap away from Elion. Double jump in by Maston Meerkat, and Snoopy is the one who picks him up. Taiko Drums taunts in too. Both of them, however, being the front line. Mass stuck inside the home sweet home fire, and Baranir will be able to take him down. Snoopy tries to jump in and take down Uzi, stuck behind the Scorpion, but Uzi very tanky on that Osiris. The shield holds him for a little while, but finally Baskin puts himself on the board. Gino zoning the other two members, but a big potion toss from Baroniri puts quite a bit of damage into the mid laner. Gino finds one, but Baroniri with a blast off will take down Meerkat.
Nearly gets Gino in the process as well. Snoopy just going to look for a blue buff strip away after the fact, and with only this Baba Yaga being the last man standing here for the average Joes, Creep Wave's not really in a favorable position, though, for the Herculean Hoofs to look for any sort of substantial push inside of the lanes themselves, so they'll opt to just try and take away this Pyromancer, but Bedron still healthy enough to try and contest.
And he just erased the last little bit of health that Gino had. Now he's on full run. Raiju comes through, waiting it out with the Aegis as much as he can. Potion toss is good, not good enough for the kill. Baskin, however, will be able to find it with the percussive storm. And Baroniri, he does manage to fall, but holds them off the Pyromancer.
But it's also going to be at the expense of his Aegis, so that's certainly something that Mask is going to be looking to try and take advantage of for the next teamfight grouping, as this Fire Giant Pyromancer territory continues to be the center of focus here for both of these teams. 25 minutes in climbing, though, this is where things start to get a little bit more finicky, J-Mac, because these death timers are starting to approach the period of no return. If there's a full wipe, it could be the end of the game. Not even so much about the objectives themselves.
I mean, we're looking at 45+ second respawn timers, but even with that respawn, my immediate eyes turned towards Baroniri's item build, and he went with that Sacrificial Shroud. He's already sitting at the top of the damage charts, 25,000 to his name, almost at 26k, and now that he's got Sacrificial Shroud, getting that nice little boost to his damage at the expense of a minuscule amount of health, since he does have some lifesteal up into the build. He was already chunking before. Now it's going to hurt a whole lot more, and with that, the Hoofs, they're going to start their luck here at the Fire Giant, down to half, but looking for the fight. Crashing in onto Promise and Uzi. Tycho drums come through. Meerkat finds Griff, and the drums push Promise away. He gets stuck inside the Winds of Samash, trying to make his way out, and will manage to do so, but into the home sweet home goes Baroniri, throwing it out for zone.
But few ultimates expended here, and every ultimate expended for the Herculean Hoofs. Fire Giant gonna have to be dropped for the time being. El Leon, though, eats a fat chunk of damage. As soon as he tries to step up, his HP bar goes down to practically nothing. Mask now starting to play a little bit more aggressive. A flank opportunity could be in the works here.
As he gets a stun onto Meerkat, Baroniri under the tower. He gets stunned out, leapt on by Meerkat, and bursted down. No Aegis to save his life this time around. Mask will pick up the mid laner. Uzi has to leap away, and Promise trying to find his way into the fight on the tail end of it. Uzi getting low, and he may be able to make it out because the Dharmic Pillars are there, but no, Baskin has the Thunder Crash to get back in. Meerkat leaps in, and just as quickly as Elion joins the fight, he takes his exit path, stage left to the fountain, and Snoopy will pick up Promise for the quick deicide onto the Joes.
And now that should be the Fire Giant opportunity here for the Herculean Hoofs. A successful team fight collapse, and it's just so quick by the Hoofs, and the way that they managed to continue toggling the aggression the entire way through. I think a lot of that is just credit to Mask making these heads-up flank plays happen for the team.
33 kills across the board, 27 in, and again, we go towards this Fire Giant. Frenzy got to be popped by Gino, and they just want to guarantee this Fire Giant for themselves, and there's no one to stop them. Meerkat is zoning away Griff. He'll trade out his life, but Fire Giant does manage to go the way of the Hoofs.
A decent win, I think, for the Hoofs. Trading out a solo laner, though, a little bit. It might have been unnecessary there for Meerkat. A little bit deep on the prevention, but safe than sorry, I guess, is the theme here for the Herculean Hoofs on that one. Primal Fury, though, could potentially be looked at now by the average Joes. However, Herculean Hoofs already made it out of base off of the back-end buys from taking that Fire Giant. Primal Fury, though, still not going to be their primary focus. Instead, it'll be the Greater Scorpion. Understand there's just a 5-man strong grouping, and this is where things start to get a little bit more problematic for the average Joes, because as far as the siege is concerned, they're going to have to play really heavily around this Baba Yaga, and I'm just not sold on how effective the actual clear is going to be surrounding those creep waves and still having enough left in the tank to actually look for a team fight after the fact, because I'm certain that the Herculean Hoofs, based off how they've been playing already, they don't care about whatever towers or phoenixes are in their way. They will dive and look for the kills every single time if possible.
Ozzy was able to make good use of this teleport in the early game, but now we're in the late game. This teleport is essentially kind of useless to them unless they're going for a super siege down to one of the lanes, can get a nice teleport to the ward at that point. But essentially for this point, there's no team fight relic for them. They have a non-upgraded Sunder, a couple sets of blinks, and then just beads Aegis across the board. There's no team fight relics here for the Joes. Now, granted, only one major team fight relic on the side of the Hoofs there with that girdle, or with that Belt of Frenzy online for them, and the upgraded Sunder, which has a ton of value even just compared to the standard Sunder. It's going to allow them to push in, take that tier 2 tower on the left side, and make their way up towards the Phoenix.
But that upgraded Belt of Frenzy is going to be a problem here for the average Joes, because Herculean Hoofs, they've already got the Draconic Form, the Coerce working in their favor, so having a little bit of boosted damage, and Beiron already down underneath half HP, he's going to have to retreat to the fountain.
Yeah, that was a one combo from Baskin, sending him back to the fountain. Meerkat going to step forward, drop the winds onto Griff, and promise Griff going to have to leap away as quickly as possible. The Phoenix does go down, thanks to the help of Snoopy and Baskin, able to keep that. Into the home sweet home goes Bayroniri, throwing out some of the damage, but not going to have enough, and just as soon as he drops out of it, he loses half his health on the back end. But Frenzy means fight, and in they go, but not going to find a stun onto anybody, not going to find the root from the ultimate onto Mass, and that'll be the quick disengage almost as quickly as it started.
That pillar was disgusting from Griff, by the way, but now it's up to El Leon. He's going to be able to find that last breath onto Meerkat, but the dive's coming through from Gino. Great cage in from Ozzy, but there's no follow-up. Cancel that. Griff's going to be able to find Gino a little bit too deep underneath that Phoenix territory, and losing the Fafnir, though, doesn't seem to dissuade Herculean Hoofs from the push.
Baskin goes in aggressive with the Thunder Crash, but Meerkat meets the fate of Griff, goes in with the Desert's Fury. Mass pushed against the wall, but that a triple kill for the Hunter. Griff still fighting through, but he gets hit by that Raiju. He's got to get out. Thunder Crash, he gets a double kill from Baskin instantly, but he will fall to the might of El Leon, holding off on that mid lane Phoenix defense.
The most painful loss, though, there for the average Joes. Griff going down means that there's no potential for them to try and re-siege the rest of this map. Snoopy just going to be hanging around. Seems as though he might have that Baba Yaga in his sights. Don't think that Veroneri even has any idea that this Uller is hunting right behind him.
Snoopy looking for the flank. Bayroniri not going to spot him out yet. No wards to catch it. He's playing very patiently on this Uller. Does get the axe toss, and a nice full combo puts Bayroniri well under his health bar. Leap in, and one more base because all that's needed. Potion toss misses, and Snoopy able to get that base to clean him up.
Never safe on the map when the Herculean Hooves are in play, and that is just a great execution there from Snoopy. Now that Baba Yaga is going to be sitting out for a solid minute, so by the time Bedron respawns, Fire Giant's already going to be back in contention for play. But if I'm the Herculean Hooves here, J-Mac, I'm just looking to continue staggering these respawn timers and continue trying to find pick opportunities, which is more than possible when there's only 4 members of the average Joes left in play.
Snoopy now 6-1 on the Uller, finishes off his Titan's Bane, as well as maxing out his relics and getting a Potion of Power on his last back. Had 2,500 gold in hand after that siege, and the nice little solo kill that he picked up along the way here. But, I mean, Taco, when it's coming down to these last few fights, I mean, the teams are essentially even at this point, about maybe a quarter of an item away from them, you know, one tier here or there. Where's the win condition for the Joes to kind of bring themselves back in?
For the average Joes, they've just got to try and play around these Dharmic Pillars and the Odin Cage a little bit better. Oftentimes we've been seeing the Uzi utilize his cage at the same time as those Dharmic Pillars, and it might be better to try and stagger the cooldowns of those utility ultimates, just because it'll make it a lot easier for the average Joes to kind of just take their time in picking apart the Herculean Hooves.
Enhanced Fire Giant started up. Mast and Leon having a little fight over on the left side. Meerkat has to leap back to his team as they reset off the fire, off the Pyromancer, and maybe look to their sides towards this Greater Scorpion just for something. No, if anything, they're just going to go ahead and clear the ward out. Stun onto Promise, and a pillar drops down to push Gino away with the Impale. Meerkat goes into the back, and the double cage drops down, but immediately Baskin is able to get out of it, though he's very low in health. Meanwhile, Meerkat and Gino are terrorizing the backline. Griff falls down. Uzi stuck in the middle of the 3 carries. He has to leap away, but it's a double leap over the wall. Baskin and Math able to team up to take him down. Promise Gonna get left on by Meerkat. Snoopy picks him up. Elion and Berenier, the last ones alive. Frenzy popped by Gino, looking for Elion. Now Mass will just walk at him and pick up the double kill. And Taco, that's looking like game number 1, just shy of 35. Berenier gonna be a little bit low, but he'll eventually be taken down by Meerkat and Baskin. He's holding off as long as he can. Aegis delays it, but with the D aside, that's going to be game 1 for the Hoofs.
The primary difference between these two teams is that it's a Odin and a Ganesh harassing the backline in comparison to an Osiris, a Fafnir, and a Gilgamesh J-Mac. Just in sheer damage alone, Herculean Hoofs a little bit more favored, and just great execution, I think, with their composition. They really took advantage of the fact that they knew as long as we've got Odin and Ganesh separated from the rest of their team, the follow-up's just not going to be capable, and it just made things, I think, a little bit too problematic for the average Joe's carries to actually be able to consistently follow up there.
And with the double staggered, or with not staggering their ultimates in that last fight, they didn't have anything to defend against their backline for it. And with that, Herculean Hoofs do come up game number 1. We'll be back after a short break to break down that game and get ready for game 2. Welcome back to the Smite Challenger Circuit for North America. Game 1 goes the way of the Herculean Hoofs, able to take down the Average Joes. We'll see if they can make the same performance in game number 2 for them. J-Mac Tucker joined with me once again. Taco, it's got to break down that first game. A lot longer of a scuffle than we imagined for our North America, especially like you were saying, kind of in between the games. The draft didn't really seem like that would be a longer game for the Hoofs.
No, it was a lot of early to mid-game focused aggression, I think, for the Herculean Hoofs. More specifically, talking about Mask on that Osiris jungle. I think that he did an excellent job alongside of Meerkat with the Gilgamesh, just constantly harassing the backline and forcing the fights to be split between the Average Joes. The Average Joes never really having a chance to actually try and channel some of their teamfight utility between the Dharmic Pillars and that Odin Cage.
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought with a very early first blood out of this Mask, the follow-up triple kill shortly after down the road, that this would have been a much quicker game for them, but they played at a fairly slow pace all throughout. But in the end, the Hoofs are able to come out on top. A lot of help to Mask on that Osiris, but I think something has to be said about Gino on this Fafnir. Great zoning, great play off this, despite some of the earlier objectives maybe being a little faulty.
And that was one of the primary differences, I think, between the Average Joes and Herculean Hoofs compositions, is that the Herculean Hoofs just had a lot more reinitiation opportunities because they didn't have to rely solely around a Dharmic Pillars or a single Odin Cage for their teamfight collapse to take place. They just have multiple stuns, multiple periods of crowd control to look for off of the Gilgamesh drop kicks. Even Mask with the tethers and the slows could make it much easier, I think, for the Hoofs to just keep those engagements rolling, which is why we oftentimes saw them just continuously diving into the Joes.
I'd like to point out that Baskin was 0-2 about 5 or so minutes until the end of the game, and then now he finishes 7-3 on the Raijin. Had a very quiet early game as far as kills go. Definitely put up the player damage. Him and Baroneri tied, or not tied, but up there each or at least respectively for their damage. 35 or so K for the Raijin. 40k damage out of Baroneri on the Baba Yaga. And I think that even moving into game number 2, I would not be surprised if we maybe saw this Baba Yaga get banned away from him, maybe see Baskin taken away from this Raijin, but at the same time, it is Baskin. He does have one of the largest god pools of the mid laners in the SCC.
I know one thing's for sure, though, J-Mac. As far as the picks and bans are concerned for game number 2, I would love to see Promise stray away from the Ganesh. Definitely one of the weaker supports, I feel, right now, currently in the given meta. And when there's so much aggression that can be channeled elsewhere through some of these other Guardians and even some of the warrior supports that we've seen come into play in recent games, I definitely feel as though the Average Joe's not really doing themselves any favors taking a Guardian that is just so... You know exactly what a Ganesh is going to do every single time on the approach, and it's very difficult to not have such an obviously telegraphed gameplay system when Ganesh is on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Ymir is a perfect god that could fit right into either of these compositions, especially for the Joes. Replace that Ganesh with Ymir, now you got a giant wall they got to worry about. Sure, they can still kind of leap over it, but I think the cutoff option may be a little bit more powerful for them. There's always Terra, who's been on such a high rise in the SPL as well, but with all the bans coming through, we do see some respect thrown towards the Fafnir, towards the Odin, but that allows for Morgan Le Fay to come through and will be instantly first picked by the Joes.
Average Joe's also not wanting to mess around with that Gilgamesh any longer, but Osiris still up for grabs here if Mask wants to resort back to that for his jungle pick, and an early prioritization into the Heimdallr for Snoopy. It seems as though Snoopy just wants to continue trying to play as aggressively as possible in that dual lane.
And they will pick up the Osiris there for Mask, giving that to him one more time, and a great performance on it. Broke the curse that we saw in the SPL yesterday after 3 straight losses onto it. We finally see some success out of it here in the SCC, so they'll be able to pick that one up. But the option now goes back over to the Joes. They got their mid laner. They got their priority pick with the mid lane. Where does their draft slide from here?
Well, they could potentially look into snagging Artemis for themselves. I think that Artemis just introduces such a strong team fight, and it is going to be the Artemis there for Griff, and makes sense given that you see the Heimdallr prioritization locked in early on, so if the Average Joes didn't look to prioritize a Hunter in this top 3, likely would have just resulted in the preferred Hunter responses for this Heim being banned away.
Geb locked in here for the Average Joes, giving them a nice little backline option and some safety with that. That stone shield, very powerful. Not quite as powerful as it used to be. I mean, remember once upon a time when that used to be a health-based shield. Those were Those were dark days in Smite when you had the 2,500 health shield out of the Geb, but not quite that strong anymore.
No, thank God.
Thank goodness.
Geb is actually my least favorite support to have to play against, by the way. But at the same time, when it comes to a competitive level of play, Geb can be fantastic. It definitely introduces, I think, a lot more peel and survivability than what Promise would have been able to find on the Ganesh. However, have to remember, Geb doesn't really approach that period of safety until you hit that mid to late game aspect. And when you look at a Heim, Osiris, and Erlong Shen, you have to assume that the Herculean Hoofs, they're going to be looking to run it down from level 1, J-Max. So my concern is how well the Joes are going to be able to handle a lot of this early game aggression, because Artemis, sure, she can clear, but she's still relatively punishable, especially against the likes of an Erlong and Osiris.
Look, I thought this Sylvanas was going to stop in the EU region, but no, even the NA boys are going to bring this one out, most likely going over into the support role. They got the Erlong Shen locked in, which leaves a little bit of ambiguity as to where him and this Osiris are going to be going. Both of them have that flexibility into their lane potential for solo, but also jungle. However, that leaves Fenrir and Guan Yu. Fenrir not often getting to make it all the way to 8th pick.
No, Fenrir usually taken out or picked by then, but at the same time, it all comes down to what these players prefer, and I like the Fenrir switch up here. I think that Fenrir kind of has a lot of the same components as Sister Cat, looking for a lot of that team initiation, team setup style of play, and the Guan Yu is just going to further assist the average Joes in terms of longevity in these team fights, looking for that out-of-combat sustain, but Sylvanas and Erlong, I think, again, the message still remains the same here for me and J-Mac. The Herculean Hooves, they're just looking to take out this Artemis early on, prevent it from being a part of any of these team fights, and if they're able to capitalize on using some of their knock-up and utility on the side of the Hooves, it could be really difficult for the Joes to actually find the damage that they need to consistently take out the Herculean Hooves roster.
The SCC never ceases to surprise us. I mean, we saw the Vamana yesterday. We got to see the Sylvanas come out. Now we're seeing Nuwa just pop out of here. Baskin had the entire mid lane God pull at his arsenal, and he decided, you know what? Nuwa looks like a lot of fun right here, and instantly locks that in for his 10th pick selection onto it. Nuwa, very hot topic coming around the back end of Season 7. Season 8 comes through, and everybody kind of thought that Nuwa was going to be that god. Everybody was like, Nuwa, Conduit gem, Archmage's gem, disgusting, like pick it up in every single game, but they do. Okay, hold on a sec. I just looked down, and we have
Are you realizing what's happening?
Yeah, I just looked at what's happening here. A 5-mana Conceptor build out of this one.
That's going to be 5 hidden blades, by the way.
That's
because,
gross.
An item that does a percentage of max health turns out is pretty freaking good, and so zero surprise for me to see Baskin choosing for that Mannequins early on, because with the Mannequin Scepter, when he gets that hidden blade online, as long as he's out of combat for 5 seconds, he's guaranteed to do around 1,000 damage with his ultimate for free.
Don't say those words. I'm scared.
Well, hey,
I'm terrified.
On the bright side, it's only going to be able to be applied to the closest member of the average Joes near him once for the passive on that Mannequin Hidden Blade, but the damage, the vision, easy application of anti-heal as well with this new wall being introduced into the mix, but Hidden Blade is definitely a menace to pretty much Smite society, J-Mac.
Look, you better hope to God it's your support who's the closest person to him. And even then, I don't know if you even want your support. 20% of your tank's max health taken almost instantly by a Nuwa is going to be devastating if they don't stop these Hooves early in their tracks. They've got to hit the gas pedal now, because if they don't look across the board and go, guys, they got 5 Mannequin Scepters, guys, they're going to have 5 Mannequin Hidden Blades at level 20, it's going to be dangerous times for the average Joes, but it's the Hooves who are stepping on the gas early, pushing them under tower already.
My other favorite part about this is that the Fire Shards has a cooldown of about 110 seconds, right? Have to assume that Baskin has the potential to look for a 40% CDR build, so we're looking at a Hidden Blade proc potentially every minute or so, which should be exciting stuff for the average Joes. I'm excited for them. I am.
I don't think excited is the proper word for that one.
I'm definitely excited.
I think absolutely terrified out of their minds of the fact that this is going to be happening. First Blood goes the way of Gino off the Wisp, and the Sylvanas once again, now in the NA, is able to strike First Blood.
And that is the advantages that early Sylvanas can proc with some of that dot damage off the Wisp. A little unfortunate spill there for Promise, but this is the time period where the Herculean Hooves should be looking to punish the Geb the most. This is the most susceptible time period for a Geb to go down. Really want to just try and keep Promise suppressed as long as possible to prevent that Geb from achieving that safety period that we talked about where Geb can be such a heavy frustration factor to deal with.
A little bit of a pause coming out here. We'll try and get you guys back into the action as quick as possible, but kind of going back into this Mannequin Scepter, I feel like we're going to talk a lot about Mannequin Scepter in these first few minutes onto it. Sylvanas in particular. Now, I love Sylvanas Mannequin Scepter. It's uncontested clear into the jungle. I don't think any god can clear better than him. You don't ever need a hand of the gods for your first few buffs, especially if you give it over to him. Lots of early lane pressure, and that's why you see them push under that tower, but the Mannequin Scepter, they have the lack of sustain as far as their mana pool goes. They have the lack of health as far as their health pools go onto it. What's kind of the... Now, I know that level 20 is kind of the ticking time bomb, but as far as the time frame of that goes, Taco, what is the actual time frame here for the Joes?
Well, the good news for the average Joes is that, sure, there's definitely a little bit of a trade-off when you offer that Mannequin Scepter early on, but I think, well, I shouldn't even say the good news for the average Joes because there's really not a whole lot of it, J-Mac, I'll be honest. It's going to be tough, I think, especially with Promise having died so early on for the average Joes to not fall victim to some of this early game pressure, but Gino actually on the run for his life right now.
No way.
Purple buff invade that did not go the way of the Herculean Hooves, might I add. The successful defense thanks to that rotation out of El Leon, but the main thing to keep in mind is that Herculean Hooves just have such strong laning phases in general, no matter what starter they opt for, J-Mac. That was kind of their theme here, was to just look for gods that can clear with or without a strong starter option.
And in this case, they chose almost all gods with strong clear option. Cleaves in both of the dual laners, Cleave in the Erlong Shen and the Osiris. I mean, 4 gods that can cleave with this into some extent, and then you just throw the Nuwa in for good measure. Like you said, the Hidden Blade late game. Gonna be able to chunk through them, but First Blood on the way of the Herculean Hooves just a little bit earlier on gives them a very slight lead as far as the gold. I say slight though, but it's already looking close to 1,500 gold.
It's not only that, it's just that Hidden Blade, when you look at all of the gods on the Herculean Hooves, I'm expecting 5 blinks at some point in time. Maybe not for Baskin.
Nah, Baskin too.
I could see Snoopy going for a blink. I could definitely see Gino going for blink, but the core, at least, between Osiris, Erlong, and Sylvanas, they're all going to have blink, and they can all simultaneously proc Hidden Blade on one member at a time, because staying out of combat for 5 seconds is not an issue, and especially when you have blink to close the gap, I don't want to say it makes it unfair, because it's 20% of the max health every single time for each Hidden Blade proc, but it's a little unfair when you think about it. Hidden Blade is just, I think it's a problematic item. I'm not going to lie, J-Mac. I think that item is incredibly powerful, and for the average Joes, their best case scenario here is probably just to be the one starting each engagement. They're going to have to do a really good job, I think, as that mid to late game period ticks over and those Hidden Blades start coming online to just keep the Herculean Hooves in combat.
Snoopy misses the ultimate. Leon picks up Mast, who was waiting on the sideline, but now Leon might be in danger. Turtle Form comes out to try and get the knock-up onto him. Taunt comes through, but it's going to be a quick beads out of the jungler and make sure he gets over the wall. So off the engagement from the Joes, the Hoofs are the one who push back.
Good looks, though, from the average Joes. Just trying to force the Herculean Hooves to not really play as much around this dual lane, and I think they're at least sending a message to the Herculean Hooves that it's not going to be freebies looking for these purple buff invades time and time again.
Mass looking for the mid camps as they're set to respawn. Elion just going to go ahead and grab his back heartbeat camp. And a little bit of experience down in a few of these aspects here. The jungle down a level, mid down a level, supports down 2. A lot of that off the First Blood that Gino was able to get for themselves. And ever since then, it's just been a lot of focus mostly on this duo side of the map.
Really want to keep an eye on what happens with this first Gold Fury, because that was an incredibly early Scorpion pull by the Herculean Hooves. And with Gold Fury having just spawned, and Promise still not being level 4, Draugr going to be collected by the Herculean Hooves. No contestation whatsoever, as average Joes, I think, do their best to just really try and find a stability point here. they're not really having to deal with as much invade pressure anywhere else aside from duo lane just yet, J-Mac, but it's just the constant threat of knowing that the Herculean Hoofs at any point in time could look for that early game grouping and just trying to siege this Gold Fury or even mid and duo T1 towers.
You know, we were so worried on the Mannequin Hidden Blade that's not ready to level 20. I didn't even think about the objective shred that 5 Mannequin Scepters has. When that thing is ticking for 30, 40 plus every tick from 5 people onto a single one, that's a lot of extra just free damage that they're getting off that item.
Yeah, it should definitely make for a fun objective pool period for the Herculean Hoofs as Mask now looking for yet another purple buff invade opportunity. Prom is going to be the first one from the Average Joes to spot it out. And granted, Average Joes could default to just giving up the farm early on, but Mask is going to blink in and look for the knockups.
Two-man turtle onto it into the sky. Goes Baskin, gets a little bit of poke onto the mid and support, but that's just to give them some room to go ahead and pick up this red buff. That'll go around Geno's waist, and a purple buff invade on the back end of that as well. Griff unable to do anything about it, just kind of stuck in lane at this point on the Artemis.
Smart groupings, though, by the Herculean Hoofs. They're definitely just trying to play their advantages. A good force blink now by Mask as he'll be shy of landing that root onto the Geb. Root also not going to connect there for Geno. Neither will the pool on that Sylvanas. Snoopy, on the other hand, under fire from Griff. Going to Bifrost back into the lane and just look for some clear potential. Great Ragnarok out of El Leon, but the damage is definitely able to connect, and Mask will be the first to fall for Average Joes.
And Baskin able to pick up Promise with the fog afterwards. Leon just trying to juke away from Geno as much as possible, but the nice root sets up for the damage afterward. Baskin able to get another kill. Baroniri goes in with the ult, but only connects one of the shots. The stun comes through, forces a quick and early bead. Sigil off the mark by Baroniri. Baskin needs one more shot with the Shining Metal, maybe, but not gonna find it. All the while, Snoopy loses out on a solo fight against Griff.
Great heads-up play there from Griff. Understands that all the attention from the Herculean Hoofs currently being channeled into that mid lane means he can look for his own purple buff invade, gives Snoopy a taste of his own medicine. Seems as though Snoopy was able to confirm the purple for himself, but ultimate versus ultimate have to favor the Caledonian board against the Grand Slam of Niflheim.
Ozzy gonna use the Cavalry Charge to try and stop Meerkat, and will force the Lord of the Afterlife out of the solo laner as well. So an ult for ult trade puts the solo laners at a dead even state. Both of them with their first defensive items online. It's going to be the Breastplate of Valor for Ozzy for some of that extra cooldown, and Meerkat opts over towards the Mystical Mail just for a little bit of extra free poke.
And if we're looking for a win condition, Average Joes have certainly found it inside of Griff. It's going to be about how well they're actually able to protect Griff in these engagements, J-Mac, if they want to find themselves being able to go toe-to-toe with the Herculean Hoofs roster here, because there is so much pressure across the board for the Herculean Hoofs. Even with Snoopy getting soloed, it's another 3-man grouping out of the Hoofs, another purple buff invade punishing Griff.
That pull onto Griff so good, the root comes in afterwards, but they left Geno high and dry all by himself. Snoopy will rotate over to give him some help. Mass goes in for the 2-man taunt, but Griff ultimately the one to pick up the kill for it. Geno does fall down. Even after a great pull off of that one, he still ends up falling.
But the problem that I'm seeing here, J-Mac, is Herculean Hoofs, they're the ones dying or losing one member at a time, and yet it's the Average Joes that are being forced to back off. Average Joes, they're finding picks, they're finding responses, but they're not having enough left over to do anything with those exchanges after the fact, unlike the Herculean Hoofs, where they might have lost Geno, but they'll still take the Gold Fury. They'll still take the Purple Buff Invade. They even took the Scorpion from Average Joe's side of the map on top of everything else. And Herculean Hoofs just understanding, sure, we might lose a member or two in the process, but that doesn't mean that we're completely out of the fight just yet.
Scorpion started up here on the side of the Hooves, and they'll make sure, or on the Joes, and they'll make sure that they can secure that one. Meerkat just a little off the mark with the tether for it, but I mean, yeah, it's just as you're saying. They go through, they commit so much, and they're only killing one person, and then losing 2 members half health just about onto it. And however, though, they have stemmed some of the bleeding for it. The experience is still only teetering around that 3,000-4,000 mark. The gold has only gone up about 500-600 from what it was about 4 or 5 minutes ago. So the Joes are holding on, but how long can you just hold on against the Hoofs at this rate?
And it's certainly a painful experience as Uzi. He's tired of holding on. He's going to force out that Lord of the Afterlife there from Meerkat, but plenty of space created there for Meerkat, understanding that without that cavalry charge, Uzi doesn't really have any sort of kill opportunity. Plus, Uzi just too low on mana in general to really look for anything after the fact. Meanwhile, Herculean Hoofs, they're going to charge right back over to this purple side. Griff's going to be forced out of the Caledonian board preemptively, which means purple buff all free here for the Herculean Hoofs. Gino also going to show face just for good measure, but I think it says a lot, J-Mac, and I'll tell you one thing for sure. Competitive, definitely not ranked, but it always feels awful being the ADC that finds a solo kill, and yet you look down the lane and your opponent still has a 1-level lead and gold ahead of you.
I think it's just a matter of any role you get that's like, yes, got that solo kill.
It always happens in ADC though, man.
It is for ADC. It feels even worse for the mid laners as well. Like, you get that one big kill, like, yes, I got the kill, and you look across there like, why is he 2 levels up on me now? I got the kill.
Why am I down 1,000 gold?
Where did I lose all my experience? How did he get an entire item ahead of me? When did this happen?
And again, it's just a showcase and an attestament to the fact that the Herculean Hoofs, they know they've got the early and mid game on lock. So they're going to continue, I think, just battering away at this dual lane, trying to prevent this Geb Artemis from ever approaching that period where they can best be utilized.
Gino going to be engaged on by Leon, but immediately turned back and probably regretting his decision of jumping onto the tree. Promise going to have to use the Cataclysm just defensively to zone them away. Bayronir still holding on to the ultimate of his own. But yeah, Elion probably doesn't feel too hot there. Neither does Promise after taking a big stun there from Basket.
Decent chunk of damage being applied onto Bayron as well. Griff gonna rotate in for good measure, but
ouch.
Goodbye to his HP bar, goodbye to his life potential,
Ouch.
his mask with a great root off of Gino. Gonna be able to pick up Artemis in the process. A painful punish there for Griff. Seemed as though he would have had an impactful play, but Promise he'll die underneath the tower anyway.
Yep, and here comes Meerkat from the solo lane looking for some kills. A nice sigil will hold him off for the time being. Aegis is going to root Bayonetta in place, and Meerkat will finally find the final basics needed for the double kill. But that was, what, a 4-kill swing for 0 in that mid lane fight.
Unfortunate there for Bayron as well. That T2 tower just took a second to realize that it wanted to actually hit Meerkat in the process, although not sure that an extra shot or two would have really made all that much of a difference there in terms of Meerkat being punished by the Average Joes. 1 by 1, Average Joes being wiped off the map here, and the Herculean Hoofs just continue to extend their lead. So starting to trickle away at a much faster pace than what we saw last game. Snoopy gonna be a little bit off the mark here and potentially punished, but he's got the Bifrost. He's just fine. He's out of there.
Luckily, his short range one for him another second, and he definitely would have been dead there. Gino gonna come by to play a support for Promise goes to the blink, but immediate Gallarhorn by Snoopy just saves his life. He's able to walk away. Can't say the same for Griff, though. He might just get soloed here by Gino. Stone Shield comes through just to save him from some of the health damage coming out of Gino. But I mean, we talked about how, you get the solo kill as the ADC. You look down, feels bad that they're a level up on you. You know what feels even worse is when you're the jungler on the team and you look across the board and the enemy support is a higher level than you.
Yeah, Elion certainly along for the ride this game. And I think a big portion of that just comes down to the fact that it's difficult to play jungle when your support gets so punished early on because, unfortunately for Promise, being a Geb that's now sitting 3 levels behind this Sylvanas, it's just tough for any sort of aggressive initiations to actually be sought out. You have Promise with the blink. It's evident that the idea was for the Geb to try and get some of those cataclysms going early in favor of the Average Joe's team fight potential. It's just unfortunate that it seems to have worked against them here.
Well, Snoopy and Griff having a boxing match. The Stone Shield comes out, and that will be enough to save Griff. Meerkat dives in with the Lord of the Afterlife, trying to find Uzi, but the Tallow Assault, just too much damage. Mask not able to help out his solo laner and take down Uzi onto that flip side. The lack of anti-heal really coming in big against him in that fight.
However, Uzi's got to be careful. Mask, though, will be just shy. I'm actually looking for a punish with Gino backing him up. Oni Fury, though, has spawned, and Meerkat, Snoopy, they're both still out for another 20 seconds or so, but there's just nobody really in position just yet from the Average Joes to actually look towards taking away that Oni Fury before the likes of the Herculean Hoofs respawn. And if the Herculean Hoofs 5-man group could be problematic here, J-Mac, even with Average Joe's finding nice punishes against the aggression out of the Herculean Hooves in solo side of the map. This duo lane has still been relatively problematic here because Snoopy, despite dying twice now to Griff, he's still managing to maintain a small lead here.
It's about to be a third Magi's Cloak picked up on the side of the Hoofs, just waiting for Mask to finish his there. And that's going to be 3 bubbles that you got to deal with onto the flip side. Unfortunately, we don't see the 4 blinks or even the 5 blinks come out on the side of the Hoofs. They're only going to elect for their frontliners and jungle to pick that one up. Triple blink. But other than that, it's Beads Aegis across the board. Pretty much all the way, except for Uzi, who's gone for a meditation that was able to help them out in that last solo lane fight. You can see that is on its cooldown temporarily, as well as the teleport, which he used in the fight after.
Also really like the Witchblade pickup here for Promise on that Geb. Think it's going to be instrumental when dealing with the likes of an Erlong, Osiris, and Heimdall, or even Nuwa to a certain extent, as well as the Sylvanas could be impacted by that Witchblade, and a little bit of cooldown reduction can go a long way here for these Geb shields.
All right, how much player damage do you think Baskin's going to get this game? He's been firing that ult almost on cooldown. I say almost. He's not quite pulling the trigger onto it yet, but I think maybe he can break 30, 40K if this game goes a little, I'd say over 25 minutes.
Definitely 40K. If it goes past the 25-minute mark, he's easily hitting 40K.
We'll see if he can get some more big damage here. Goes out with the explosion onto El Leon. Lord of the Afterlife followed up by, but a nice stun holds him off for the time being until Gino gets him with the Terra's Wrath. And unfortunately for him, he will fall down. 5 strong, Maskin flanking around the side, looking for a kill in the midst of the tower. Uzi drops down from the realms and has a stone shield to help him for only a short while.
And Mask going to find a knock-up onto Promise as well as the Erlong pin in place. Bedron now trying to survive with his life, and Gino not interested in chasing through the entirety of the T2 tower. Keep in mind, Oni Fury still up for grabs here, as well as that freshly spawned red buff for the Average Dose. Herculean Hooves just going to do what they do best. Win the fight, take the tower, take the buffs, and now take the next objective. Just continuing to put all the map pressure in their favor.
God, that Fury is falling so fast. And there was only a couple of abilities thrown onto that one, maybe being the Soldier Shining Metal combo onto it. So much objective shred out of the Herculean Hooves that the Joes, they almost can't answer to it, but they basically have to, because if they just allow the Hooves even a few seconds of leeway onto it, no objective is going to stand in their way. No Fire Giant, no Fury, no Pyromancer, nothing can stand up to that level of damage.
Well, Baskin's going to be the first one to hit level 20 here for the Herculean Hooves. Not certain, though, if he's going to finish off his next item first or look for that Hidden Blade upgrade right away. Choice is really his for the making here, J-Mac, but more importantly, look at the level disparity between the 2 cores of these teams. Mid, jungle, support, all suffering so heavily here from the Average Joes because of all that early to mid-game aggression that the Herculean Hooves opted for.
Well, it will be the first Mannequin Hidden Blade picked up for Baskin onto this one, and we already saw it put to work. As soon as he bought it, he goes in for the ult, and I believe Promise was the closest one. Now, luckily for Promise, he's got a stone shield, so it will save him for the majority of damage, but not for all of it as the game continues to push further. I'm curious as to how much damage he padded just with that one hit. He was at 14K after that last fight. Might be even more here, and maybe a little bit dangerous there for Promise as he's stuck in the middle of 3. Make that 4 as Meerkat rotates over. Lord of the Afterlife is good as the Wrath of Terra out of Gino. Leon going to get a little bit of support there from the Dragonflight, and Uzi as well with the Cavalry Charge stuns them out, but Meerkat ultimately finds Promise. Uzi falling low as well, needs a couple more basics, but not able to take down the solo laner.
Unfortunately for Promise, he is simply a level 12 Geb, just being absolutely ragdolled by the likes of the Herculean Hooves. Griff, in the meanwhile, gets a little bit of gold in favor of Average Joes there by taking out that T2 tower in the duo side of the map, understanding that these grouped up engagements are just not really the Average Joes to win. Herculean Hooves a little bit too far out in front of their competition here. So it's better for Griff to, I think, just try and keep finding those periods of isolated farm for the entirety of the team. Maybe look for some game delay surrounding this Fire Giant, or potentially just give it up if you're the Average Joes. And knowing that it's not an enhanced Fire Giant, maybe just take your chances looking to fight underneath the Phoenixes.
If you're in Baskin's shoes here, do you go for a Chronos Pendant and get yourself the 40% CDR, or do you just go for the Ratatouille for the raw power to deal just a little bit more damage?
Well, he answered the question for me. It's going to be the
Okay.
Ratatouille. You want the maximum deeps when it comes to that hidden blade, all right? We're not doing this halfway as Baskin, and I could not be more excited for the average Joes as these mannequin hidden blades continue to trickle in for the Herculean Hoofs. Super excited to see how this Lord of the Afterlife with the mannequin's hidden blade passive combined alongside the hidden blade passive out of Baskin's fire shards is going to be. The damage is just, or the potential for damage, I think, is my favorite part of this Herculean Hoofs build right now.
A solid 2k plus damage that Baskin got out of
Instantly.
that ultimate. Just the click of a button. Nuwa's difficult, guys.
Instantly.
Like Nuwa has the hardest ultimate in the game.
You have to remember that because of Hidden Blade, J-Mac, every single one of these ultimates for the most part and some of these abilities on the Herculean Hoofs, it's a guaranteed 900 plus damage just because of a passive from an item buy. And again, you only need to be out of combat for 5 seconds. So friendly reminder for the average Joes, their best bet at this point is just to try and maybe rely on Uzi and Promise to just keep the Herculean Hoofs in combat as often as possible so as to not allow these hidden blade procs to go through.
Well, Snoopy ruined the trend here and went for the mannequin mace instead of the mannequin hidden blade. Not sure if he got the memo on that one, but he'll be able to at least amplify his basic attack power, and maybe I'll take down Mask here for El Leon as he picks up one, goes in with the Ragnarok, and immediately regrets his decision as he gets knocked up by Gino and dropped by Meerkat into the back with the Lord of the Afterlife, looking for any target. It's going to be Snoopy finding Uzi, and Meerkat still holding down the gas pedal, looking for Grip, looking for Baroniri. Into the realms goes Promise, and he'll land right back down into danger. Meerkat and Snoopy still teaming up. Baroniri finds one, but Gino finds Promise on the back, and Baroniri looking a little bit worse for wear. Blink in by Gino, but Snoopy's the one who finds a triple kill on the Hunter.
Could very well be game even for Herculean Hoofs. They do have a minion wave still on this solo side of the map, J-Mac, and El Leon, he's going to be the first one to respawn alongside a Promise, but this Phoenix likely to go down before either of them has a chance to intervene.
Minion wave does finally push in. They are able to shred that one down. 4 seconds on El Leon, and they're not willing to stick around for the commit, so it will just be a Deicide and a Phoenix going the way of the Hoofs. They're able to extend that gold lead now to 10,000, separating them. Experience, still no level 20s across the board, 18,000 experience. It seems like almost an insurmountable lead here for the Joes.
Definitely a tough hill to climb for the average Joes. They've certainly got their work cut out for them, and it's mostly about, again, just trying to find those periods of game delay. I like the initiative there, though. It was a solid punish up against Mast for El Leon and the gang to take him out when he overstepped his boundaries. However, it's about whether or not they can get out after the fact. That seems to be the primary issue here for the Herculean Hoofs, is El Leon need a good chunk of his HP from Baskin on that fire shards, and he'll be able to stim it out at least with that seething howl if he's able to find a good camp to try and proc it off of. And also, bright side here for the average Joes, the Phoenix that did go down at least is the Phoenix that's on the Fire Giant side itself.
And speaking of Fire Giant, well under half health from all the mannequin scepters and mannequin blades that are coming through the Hoofs. Shred down the Fire Giant as well as El Leon, who leapt in aggressively. Mass goes in for the taunt onto Baroniri, who's trapped in the middle of 3 and taken down by Baskin. Uzi, Griff, and Promise on full retreat because it's only going to be those 3 as the front line to defend against 5. Promise goes in with a huge cataclysm, but there's just no further follow-up onto it. Mask gets a double kill, taking down Promise, and maybe we'll get one more. Uzi falls down. Meerkat with the credit. And a little bit quicker fashion this time around, Herculean Hoofs with 21 kills, able to push through and end this game.
Yeah, unfortunately for Griff, he didn't have his Aegis available, so Lord of the Afterlife with that Mannequin Hidden Blade proc was just an instantaneous 1,300 damage to his HP bar.
Well, Baskin will be able to shred down this Titan, doing quite a bit of damage to it, and will eventually drop it down. 25 minutes to close this one out. Herculean Hoofs in a much more dominant fashion in game number 2, clean up the set and get their first win of the phase.
I think it's for the best, though, for Average Joes that we didn't get to see the full extent of what exactly the Hidden Blade procs can do for all of our sanities. Great item, by the way, Hidden Blade. Have to really appreciate that one.
It hurts a lot, and I think that the Joes learned that lesson the hard way. We are going to kick it to a break. We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up this set. I think you said it best. For all of our sanity's sake, we don't see the Penta Mannequin Hidden Blade, but that didn't stop the Herculean Hoofs from securing game number 2 and closing out their first SCC set, putting their first win on the board. J-Mac and Taco joining me once here again to kind of finish rounding out this set here. Herculean Hoofs come in a pretty dominant first set fashion.
Hidden Blade menacing aside, I think that the Herculean Hoofs still did a great job at just executing the composition that they had prioritized for. They looked for the early game, dual lane pressure most specifically, did their best to really just shut down this Geb Artemis dual lane, so Griff, Promise never really had an opportunity to be those key aspects, I think, of that average Joe's counter initiation, because when you fall just so far behind in terms of levels and experience, even if you're able to find solo kills, Herculean Hoofs, they just had the team fight on lock here.
I feel like that one kill in particular onto Elion was kind of the beginning of the end there for the average Joes. That was their one chance to get a huge pick, and instantly it all gets turned on its head as soon as Elion leaps in. Not Gino able to turn around and clean that kill up, and just from there it just became this downward sliding slope for the Joes, and ultimately they're not able to pick it back up.
I also think that that was just a great set in general for Meerkat, Mask, and Gino. Those three just felt like such a strong core here for the Herculean Hoofs today. They did an excellent job at really just toggling their aggression from target to target. It just made it extremely problematic for the average Joes to ever look for that solid moment of disengage. So it's just, when you have that much constant aggression up in your face always, it's really difficult to just look for a point in time or even just a lapse, basically, for the average Joe. They just never really had an opportunity to try and delay this game out.
Yeah, and unfortunate for them, they're not able to, like we said, they're just not able to find any kind of path back into. We did see 28,000 damage out of Baskin on the new one, just a 25-minute game, and it's never fun when you're losing out 1,000 damage per minute onto it. But looking ahead at the schedule for the next couple of days here, we do still have 2 more SCC sets to bring you before our SPL matchups. Tomorrow we'll be back with Europe, showing the Snake Hunters versus Just F6, the battle of that 3rd and 4th place team consistently over the course of the last couple of phases. And then the Sturdy Artists in Tiburones de Tijuana facing off on Sunday in the North American side yet again onto it. And, I mean, you don't really need to see any kind of standings for it. So far, we've only seen 4 teams go through. We know that Elysium topping the EU ranks, and now Herculean Hoofs topping the North American side of it, both sitting at a nice and comfortable 1-0.
And they've got to be feeling pretty good for it. But Europe, I think, take some notes here from North America that I would imagine that they're going to start getting a little bit more aggressive here. Early starts to the splits make sense. Teams want to take their times, really just kind of gauge where everybody stands. But JMac, SCC action isn't the only thing we have coming today.
Yeah, we do still have the SPL coming up for you guys in just a little while. It's going to be the Leviathans taking on the Valkyries for our first set of the day. And then we'll have the Jade Dragons and the Tartarus Titans. That Leviathan set, going to be another rough one here for the Valkyries, going up against another top team just after the Bolts. We'll see if maybe they can perform up and try and get themselves their second win of the season. It'll be a tough one for it, but we're going to take it to a break. When we come back, SPL going to be ripe and ready to go.